Good morning. We're learning as a schutz for Shlema Filan Chaya Basarach. We're at the bottom of Tzadi Zayin Abed Aleph, but I rushed through the Mishnah at the beginning of this sugya, so I'm just going to quickly review the Mishnah and the beginning of the Gemara. So the Mishnah says, Bishul by Kachim V'chulin, Kachim, Kachim Kalam. If someone cooked in a Kli, Kachim together with Chulin, or kachim together with kachim kalim. In yesh bahem b'noisen tam, obviously the kachim is going to impose restrictions on chulin, and kachim are going to impose restrictions on the kachim kalim. So if either one of those have enough to be noisen tam, the one that's more restrictive will be noisen tam to the thing that's less restrictive. Harei kalim lechalim kachamurim. At that point, you're going to have to treat, let's say you have kachim kalim mixed with kachim, you have to treat it all as kachim, as long as this kachim is nice and tam, as long as it gives a taste into the kachim kalim. Kachamurin shaban. Ve'ena te'unin merika ushtifa ve'ena paislam b'maga. And as the Gemara is going to explain, but if it's not nice and tam, then it's not going to need merika ushtifa, it's not going to be pasal b'maga. The Gemara will explain what the lashon is. Rokik shenaga, the second part of the Mishnah, Rokik shenaga barokik, a wafer of, let's say, of a mincha that touched another rokik, and they have different statuses. You know, one is more kaidish, or one is chulin, or one is pasel. Chaticha or a piece of meat together with another piece of meat. Loy kala rakikim v'loy kala chaticha sasurin. It's not the entire the thing that was touched. Let's say you had a puzzle that touched a kosher. You don't say that the one that was kosher, the whole rokik is puzzle, or the piece of meat. It only is going to make also the part that was absorbed into it. It's only going to answer to where it touched and what it absorbed, because these are both things that are hot and dry. So it goes only into the amount that it gets absorbed, which is a small amount. The Gemara slated in other places in Shas that say exactly how much it is. So first we're first going to go through the first part of the Mishnah, where we said, if there's nice and tam, the more chamerdika one is going to aser or restrict the less chamadika one. My kama. Hachi kama. This is what it means. Because the Mishnah, the language of the Mishnah was very strange. It said, first of all, that it's harei akam nechalim kachamura, but then it says ve'ein tumuruk ishtiva in paisum b'maga. What happened? We just said it does absorb, and then we said it's not at the second part. So zakma hachi kama. You have to add in, according to the Bach and the Shita, the words hachikam. This is what it's saying. Then all the restrictions will apply. You're going to have to treat the less chamer one like the more chamer one. And it's going to need to be rinsed and cleaned out and boiled out. And it's also going to passel from where it touched. But if it doesn't have a nice tam, if the more restrictive thing is so small, it's generally less than a 60th, it's not enough to give a tam, then it's not going to impose its chumras on the more kuladika part, because the chamadika one was not nice and tam. The ain't it's not going to need to be cleaned out. The kli is not going to need to be cleaned out. The ain't paislam b'maga, and it's not going to passel when it touches something. Zakdamar. Nihida kachim loibo kachim kalim niboi. How could we say that it how could we say that it doesn't need you don't need shtifa mariko shtifa because if it's not nice and tam. We're talking about kachim that found the kachim kalim, but kachim kalim also l'chayra need mariko shtifa. So how are you excusing yourself from Riko Shtiva by saying it wasn't nice and tam? Amar Abaya main tu'un kamar kachi kachim. Aval kachim kalam tu'unin. It means that the kachim will not need Mariko Shtifa. That means Kachay Kachim can have a different time period in which they, for example, if you have a Chatas, they have Kachay Kachim together with Shlomim of Kachim Kalam. So Shlomim of Kachay Kalam, you have 2 days and 1 night, while the Chatas only has 1 day and 1 night. So we're saying that the Kachay, you don't need to do a Mariko Shtifa when the time of the Kachay Kachim expires, but you will when the Kachim Kalam expires. That's the way Abaye answers it. Rav Amar Hamani of Shimni Dama Kachim Kalam into an Mariko Shtifa. No, he says this mission is going like the Man Dama, who says that in general Kachim Kalam don't need Mariko Shtifa. They don't need to be rinsed out and boiled out. So the Rabbi Shlomo l'Rav Hainu Oy Kachay Kachim Ukachim Kalam. According to Rava, we understand why we said 2 options. We said it could be a mixture of chulin with kachim or kachay kachim with kachim kalam, because it wants to tell you the chiddush that this is going like Rav Shimon, who holds that kachim kalam don't have it in Mariko Shtifa. Elabaya tarti lamali. What do we need? Both examples in the Mishnah. So the Gemara Tzrich, we need both of them. The itana kachim, the chulin. If we would have just said the first example of the Mishnah of kachim together with chulin, avamina chulin hu demavatli kachim. The lav minayu. Maybe kachim can be mavatal chulin because it's as we always know, the rule is that min b'mina is less batal than min b'she'ena mina. So maybe kachim and chulin, which is not min b'mina, so maybe the kachim, that's where we say that if it's less than, if it's not a nice and tam, then the kachim is batal in the chulin because it's in lav b'mina, so therefore it can become batal. Maybe kachay kachim, they're both kinds of kachim. Maybe you would say min b'mina is not batal, and vice versa. We also have to say the other way. V'itana kachay kachim kalam amina kachim who the alimi live tuli kachim. Maybe that which we say that by kachay kachim and kachim kalam, if you don't have a nice and tam in the kachay kachim, becomes batal. Because it's still going to be kaidish, it's still going to be kachim, so it has more kayach, is more alimus, more strength. The kachay kalim, even though it's not kachay kachim, it is kachim, so there's more strength to be mavatal a different kaidish. Aval chulin, maybe chulin is not. We're not going to say something that's kachay kachim should become, or kachim altogether should become chulin. Maybe that's not enough kayach to mavatal, so therefore tzricha. That's what we needed. Both examples. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to the second example we had given in the Mishnah. Rakik shehigia barakik. If you had one of the wafers or some kind of a mincha, there was a rakik that was pasul, and it touched another rakik, a different rakika from a different mincha that's kosher. We said there it's going to aser b'maga. It's not going to answer the whole thing. It's only going to answer as far as it absorbs. And the same thing will be with basar of kachim. The Torah says whatever it touches, you need. It's going to be kaidish. So maybe when the Torah says that it's going to passel, that it's going to answer something that it touches, maybe it means without absorbing. Maybe just touching, even if there's no absorption, even if it's not hot, just touching itself is enough to aser. Tamaloyma bibsara. Torah says bibsara ad sheyibla bibsara. And the lashon bibsara goes into the meat. It has to be absorbed into the meat. There has to be some type of absorption. Just touching is not enough. How do I know that if it touches that it only asks the part that's bala? Maybe it asks the whole thing. As long as there's some absorption, the entire piece of meat, for example, becomes pasul. Tamal Leimer yiga. So we also have the lashon of yiga, which is mashma touching. It doesn't need the actual, doesn't need the physical absorption. The lashon of yiga is mashma without. We learned from Bipsara that yiga doesn't mean just touching, but it's mashma that it's not just the fact that it says yiga that teaches you that hanegeya pasul. What it touched is pasul. Haketzat chaytech as malkum shabala b'sara v'loy You cut off the amount that was absorbed, so it's in between. It's only the part that was touched, but it has to absorb. So therefore, we have two opposing mashmayas. On the one hand, it says it has to go into the basar. It's mashma that the isser is more than just from touching. So that tells you that it has to absorb. But it does say yiga. So yiga tells you the part that it touches, that means only the part that was touching and that it absorbed into, that's what's going to be asur. You could cut that out and the rest is going to be kosher. Bibsara, we learned from the Lashon Bibsara, in the Basar, not in the sinews and not in the stone, in the bones and not in the horns and not in the hoofs. So that tells you that these are excluded, that if they touch, they're not going to become pasul. They don't get the din of pasuls at all. Yikdash, Lias Kamay. The Torah says Yikdash, if it touches, it's going to become whatever the Chatas touches, it's going to be Yikdash, it's going to be Kaddish with like it. Lias Kamaya is going to be like the Chatas. HaKetzad, in Psula he Tipasal. If the Chatas was the Chatas Psula, whatever it touches will also be Pasal. In Ksherehi, Teachal Kechamashaba. But if the two Karbanis, let's say the Basar of a Chatas, touch the Basar of a Shlamim, they're both going to have the Chumrah of the more Chumrah, which is the Chatas. So, Gemara Amai, why are we saying that if you have a Pasal Chatas that touched the Kasher Chatas, so we're saying it's all going to become Pasal and you're going to have to burn it. There's a loisa say that you can't eat something that's Pasal. Why do we say even though obviously the carbon that became pasul, it lost its essay to eat, but this thing that touched it, it doesn't become pasul because it touched, it just gets pasul for you to eat. The Torah says you can't eat it. But why? So why don't we say that there's the essay that you're supposed to eat a carbon, and this is just the lois to say the Torah says whatever it touches should get the chumrah of the thing that it touched, but that's just a lois essay telling you that you shouldn't eat it. Let the essay of eating the kosher meat of the kosher carbon be doicha the lois essay, which says that since it absorbed from a pasul carbon, you shouldn't eat it. Amarava ain't esa doicha lois essay sheben mikdash. Although it's true that esa is doicha lois essay in the Beis Hamikdash, that's not the case. We have different rules in the Beis Hamikdash. And Loisa says if the Torah tells you not to eat it, even if there's an essay for carrot, you can't. We will bring a riot that this is the case. The Torah says about the Korban Pesach that you're not allowed to break the bone of the Korban Pesach. Doesn't make a difference if the bone has marrow in it, edible marrow in it, or not. Why don't we say that the essay of eating the Korban Pesach is deicha the lois essay of breaking the bone? Elamai, since the Torah, so basically we're learning out from here that an essay is not deicha lois essay sheba mikdash. The Torah tells you not to eat the etzem. That means even if it has marrow in it. So you see from that an essay is not deicha lois essay sheba mikdash. Rav Ashi has a different answer for the original question. Why isn't Ese Deicha Lois Ese? Rashi Ami Yikdash Esehu. The Torah says Yikdash, that when the Torah says when you mix the dam, the basar of a chatas together with a different basar, it becomes Yikdash, which is an essay. It's not just a lois ese of not eating that which was mixed in with the chatas psula, but it's also an essay. So it's an essay, and lois essay can I get an essay, and that's why the essay is not deicha. So we've learned out that we have this pasuk. We learned from the pasuk by chatas that it becomes kaddish when it absorbs shar kachim minal. And how do we know other kachim? So now we're going to have the next amud and a half is just going to be, we're going to go through a pasuk Amar Shmuel, Meshubah be Allah. Zois HaTorah la'oila la'mincha l'chatas la'asham la'miluim v'la'zevach hashlam. There's this pasuk that compares all these different karbanos, and we're going to learn something from each one of these things that are mentioned in the pasuk. And one of them will be to tell you the chatas tells you that whatever is absorbed in it it's going to passel, and we're going to learn that holds true for all other karbanos as well. But in the course of doing that, once we brought up this pasuk, we're going to learn all the different things that we learn for each one of the things mentioned in the pasuk, what it teaches us to other karbanos. And there's going to be two versions of that. There's going to be two brises that learn out different things from this pasuk. But in any case, they both agree that we compare all the things in the pasuk. So Zois HaTorah la'oila, Zok the Gemara la'oila, chiyayla ma oila tu'una kli av kol tu'una kli. We learn out from an oila that oila needs to be done with a kli. Also, all other karbanos have to be done with a kli. My kli, which kli are we talking about? Ilay mazrik. If you'll say you're talking about a bowl that you have to be makabel the dam in a bowl that's a kli sharis, the shamit tzibur nami ksiv bahu. The yikach Moshe chati adam v'yasam ba'ganis. He put it into the bowls. So we already have by other karbanos a requirement of shalmi by shalmi tzibur that it needs to be in a kli sharis. Ella the sakin. It means the knife, which is actually on the next. Rashi explains it on the next amud. On the top, he says it comes to exclude. You can't use a reed or something sharp that's not a kli. You need a kli sharis, a sakan that's a kli sharis for the shchita. Zakta Gemara va'ila gufa minalan. So good. You're saying what you're saying that you learn out from oila that it needs a kli. That you need a sakin. Where do you know that a oila needs a sakin? So the Gemara v'ksiv vayishlach Avram es yada v'yikachas ha'machelas by the Akedah. It says that Avram took the knife. V'hasam oilahu t'chsiv vayaleu la'oila. The Torah says that after he took down the Yitzchak, he brought a oila. He found the aisle and he brought it as an oila. So you see, there was supposed to be an oila, and there was a requirement of a knife. So that's what we learn out from oila, that you need a sak in the klishas. Mincha, the next thing the pasuk said is the oila v'la mincha. Ma mincha in nechelas el zichri kuna av kol in nechal el zichri kuna. It's telling you that it has to be. It's only eaten by kehanim that are male kehanim. Maihi ichatas. I'm sorry, did I skip? Av kol in nechal el zichri kuna. Mahi, what is it coming to tell? Which thing is it teaching you that you need zichrei kuna? If it's coming to tell you, it's certainly not telling you oila, because oila is not eaten at all. And ichatas va'asham behedrik sivu called zacha b'kahanim yechlenu. Vishalmi tzibur, and if it's talking about shalmi tzibur, mirubui de krasi. Now it can't be talking about regular shlam, because regular shlam is not eaten by kahanim at all. It's only saying that those things that are eaten are only going to be eaten, that are eaten by Kaihanim, are only going to be eaten by Zichrei Kuna. But by Shamei Tzibur, we learn it out from a pasuk. The Torah says about Zichrei by Shamei Tzibur should be eaten in the Azara, and it could be eaten by a Kayan who's a Zachar. So we have a different pasuk to tell you. So we're saying we're learning out from mincha, that it's only eaten by kaihanim, by zichrei kahuna, but everything else we have psukim to tell you that it's only eaten by zichrei kahuna. So what do I need this pasuk to tell you? Shalmit tzibur, we have a different pasuk to tell it. It's taka machloikus about where you learn it out. Although that brayse says you learn it out by Shalmit tzibur from the pasuk, but he learns it out from mincha. Chatas, what do we learn out from chatas? Chatas is what the whole point of why we said this. Ma chatas is kadeshes beblua, avkom is kadeshes beblua. We learn out from chatas that it's asers, whatever it's absorbed into, so too will get the din, whatever it's absorbed into will get the same din, will need mariko shtifa. So everything will have, all the karbanos will have that same din. Asham, what do we learn out from asham? Asham is only brought from a zacha. The behema has to be a zacha. Ma asham ein shfir v'shilya kaddish by. Just like an asham, since there's no male ashamis, so there's no such thing as a fetus. So just like it, obviously, there's never going to be a fetus and a placenta that if they have the emurim, that they're not going to have a din that they're kaddish, they have to be burnt on the mizbeach. Avkol and shfir v'shilya kaddish by. All other karbanos, even if you shecht a female sheep and it has inside of it a fetus, that fetus contains emurim, it's also not going to be kaddish because we learn it out from the asham, which certainly doesn't have it. So tomorrow we see from here two things. Kasava vlad is kachim b'aviyasan hein kedushim. We see from here there's a machlokes about whether what the kedusha of a vlad that you find in a behema is it come after they get born, so therefore what's inside of them does not have the same kedusha. And we're learning it out from asham. And we also see B'dan Efsher Mishi Efsher. Also, we're saying we're learning it from Asham because the Asham there's no Vlad, but that's only because of Asham it's not possible to have a Vlad. So one might say, how could you learn out from the fact that Asham doesn't have a Vlad? The only reason it doesn't have is because it's impossible, but not because there's no Torah. The Torah doesn't tell you that the Asham's Vlad is kosher. Just it's not feasible. So maybe you can't learn out from that. So by this, you can learn out, even though it's something that's not possible, you can learn out from it. And finally, in the pasuk it says La Miluim, for the karbanos that were brought at the Chanukas Habayis, Ma Miluim Maisreim B'Sreifa Vein Balechayim B'Maisreim, just like the Miluim, the noiser of the basar of the Miluim has a din Sreifa like all noiser, but the Balechayim there was no. You can sometimes have a Balchayim, you could have an animal that was Makudish that ends up not being brought because it got lost, and then you put another one in its place, or it was left over. You got another one to back up in case something happened to the original one. So this one still remains after the carbon was brought. But that there was no such thing by the Milum. There was no occasion that was extras brought. So there was no Balechayim b'Maisreim. Av kol Maisreim b'Sreifa ve'en Balechayim b'Maisreim. Teaches you that in all karbanos, there's not going to they're leftover animals that were not brought don't get the din of nicer. And finally, the last thing in the pasuk was shlamim. We learn that from shlamim, ma shlamim mefaglin misfaglin. Just like shlamim can become pigol, umispaglin. Rashi explains mispaglin means if there's nesachim that comes along with the shlamim. If the shlamim becomes pigol, the nesachim also get a din pigol. I've called mefaglin mispaglin. All karbanos will also be mefagal, whatever nesachim come along with it if they become pig. So that is the first version of how to learn these psukim. Masnisus on Mishmei de Rabbi Kiva learn different from each one of these different karbanos. Mincha, ma mincha miskadesh bevlua, avkol miskadesh bevlua. He says mincha, we learn out the same thing like we said by the Torah says by it also that kol asher yigaba yikdash. So we're going to learn out the same thing like we said by Chatas. We're also going to have it by Mincha. We have to say both of them. The Ashmina Mincha, the ID, the Rekika. Since it's, if for some reason the Mincha was soft, the Mincha was often like loaves. So Mivla, therefore it's more absorbent. Chatas is meat. Meat is not as absorbent as bread, Emalai. The Ashmina Chatas, and if it was a Chatas, Mishum the Kar. Rashi says kara means that it's thick, it's wide. Maybe a wider thing, once it absorbs, it doesn't come out. I don't know. I don't exactly understand why something that's thicker is more absorbent. They say that it's more fatty. The fat goes into it. I'm not exactly sure. But mincha maybe not. Shricha, that's why you need both. Chatas, machatz ene ba'elam and achulin. And we also say in addition by chatas, what is chatas coming for? It comes from chulin. It means it's like we're going to see. It can't be brought from something that's ma'aser sheni or truma or that has or from the tzibur. It only comes from something that's doesn't have any other restrictions in it. Ubiyayim achat is only brought by day. Ubiyadei eman is only brought with his right hand. So that will teach you to all other karbanos also going to have all these dinim. Afkol in a boy elam nachulim biyoyim biyadei heimanis. Frektimor v'chatas minalan. How do we know by chatas that this is the case? Amar Rav Chizda Amar Krov Hikavarin is par chatas shaloi mishaloi v'loi mishal tzibur. The first thing is that we said is it has to be om nachulin. So the Torah says Aaron brings the par chatas. But I think it's talking about the par koyin Mashiach. So it says Ashaloi mishaloi v'loi mishal tzibur. It has to come from his, and he can't use tzibur money at v'loi mishal meiser, and he can't use meiser sheni money to bring his chatas. What do you know? B'yayim, fraktig mara b'yayim. Why are you saying going out b'yayim to other karbanos? B'yayim tuvesi nafka. We have a different pasuk. Torah says b'yayim tuvesi on the day that it was given. That tells you, and that's going on all the karbanos. So gemara kadin aspa. Once we said el elabam and achulin, the other two things that we said we learn out from chatas are really not necessary. You could also learn out Yadei Haimanis for all karbanos from Rabbi Chana. Rabbi Chana, Reish Lakish, Kol Makom Shenema Etzbo Kahuna Eine El Liyamin. Whenever the Torah says Etzbo or requirement of with the finger or that be done by a kohen, it means it must be done with the right hand. So Gemara Kadin Aspa. Again, once we said there were three things we learn out from Chatas. We learn Chulin and we learn B'Yadei Haimanis and we learn B'Yayim. So B'Yayim and B'Yadei Haimanis were really extra. They weren't necessary. Another answer, but Lagabi Yadei Haimanis is he holds like Reb Shimon Damar Etzba loy by Kahuna by Etzba. He says that although it says Kahuna by all the Kabbanis, it doesn't say Etzba by all the Kahuna, and even though he said Etzba Kahuna tells you that it needs to be done with the right hand, it's not enough if it just says Kahuna. If it says Etzba and Kahuna, if it says Etzba, it doesn't need to also say Kayin. But if it says Kayin, it still needs to say Etzba. You have to look at the Gemara over there if that's the case. What is he saying about Kahuna? If you say Etzba doesn't need Kahuna and Kahuna needs Etzba, then you really don't need Kahuna. So Gemara, Asham, what do you learn out from Asham? Ma Asham atzmoisa mutar, nafkol atzmoisa mutar. Just like in Asham, we learned out back a couple of 2 weeks ago, we learned from Asham the din that the atzamas, if there's no psul on the atzamas of a carbon, so that will go to all the kabbalas. Amar Rava. Pshitali, dam chatas lamata. This is going to be very quick. Dam chatas lamata v'dam oilo lamayla. We said a din that if we know the din of kibus, that if dam goes on a beged, you have to wash it out, and that's only on chatas, not on other karbanos. So the dam chatas was the first thing to fall on the beged, and then the dam oilo fell on top of it. Ta'an kibus, you're certainly going to need kibus because it has dam chatas in it. Rav asked the following question: Dam oil lamata v'dam chatas lamayla. If first the dam oil fell in it, which is not required kibus, it's only on chatas, and then the dam chatas fell in it. Mao misham negeyahu. Is it because the dam chatas touches the beged? V'hanegeya, it did touch the beged. Aydel misham beluho. Do you need that it's also absorbed? V'halei bala. Since it already absorbed the oila, when the dam chatas falls on it, it doesn't get absorbed. It just touches it, but it doesn't go inside. Hada pashta de ein tu'unin kibus. He said einachanami. It has to be absorbed. Just being on top is not going to require kibus. Amar Rava pshitali dam al bigdoi chaytzitz. If there's dam on a person's beged, it's chaytzitz. You know that he's not going to be able. If it's toivel, the beged, it's not going to be a valid tefillah. Then tavachu. But if he's a butcher, ein chaytzitz. He's used to having beged. There's always dam on his beged. So he doesn't even care about it. So that's not going to be chaytzitz. Something he's not makbid on is not chaytzitz. Revav al bigdoi chaytzitz. And similarly, if there's grease or fat on his beged, that's going to be chaytzitz. And moicha revavu. But if he's someone who sells oil, so his clothing is always greasy, ain't a chaytzitz. He's used to it. He's not makbid. Boi rava dam or revav al bigdoi mao. Someone who has both blood and grease on his beged. What's the din? Im tavachu tebeklim shemavav. Gemara says, what kind of question is it? Whichever one. If he's it should certainly be chaytzitz, because if he's a butcher, then the grease he's going to be makbid on. And if he's someone who sells grease, then he's going to be makbid on the dam. We're talking about someone who has two jobs. He does both of them, so he's not makbid on either one. But the question is, achadol ekapid, atati kapid. Maybe even if he's not makbid on either one of them, but if you get both on his thing, that's too much for him. Oidom atati nami lekapid. Since he's not makbid on each one individually, even if you have both of them, he's also not makbid, and it won't be chaytzid. Chaytzid's teiku. The Gemara says it's a teiku. Hadan Allah dam chatas. Shkayach.